Hello and welcome. In this series of videos, we are going to work through enhancing the Biography website through a number of visual elements that we are going to discuss in more detail and broken down kind of bit by bit to help you through this. The video series assumes that you have watched the lynda.com video that was provided on the course website about the box model. We talked about it briefly in class, if you're in the hybrid class. It was also shared in the video that introduced CSS, and it was just a really brief introduction. The video link that I provided goes into more detail and will walk you through what exactly it is. And I encourage you to watch that prior to going through this series of videos, otherwise it's going to be quite confusing as far as when I refer to things like the box model and what it is that we're doing. So on my screen, you can see that I have my biography site where we left off at the end of the biography CSS assignment. Yours should look very similar. It probably has some different colors. Obviously, your content is different, but as an overall, it should be very similar. You should have your name as the headline in your header 1 at the top. Then you should have a navigation. It can either be a cross or it can be list element going down or paragraphs going down. You're going to have an H2 with some information and an H3 with an unordered list. Going into the About Me page, we have more content. Image gallery currently is completely blank. In this series of videos, we are going to be using some of the visual elements that are going to enhance this. And some of those pieces are things like margin, border, padding, images, of course, and not just images on the page, but background images as well. We're going to look also at some gradients and how to apply those. And we're also going to work on hyperlinking one of our images. We're also going to add some rounded corners, and we might throw in a few other things. But it's going to kind of tackle a whole bunch of the visual elements, not all, that we can do in CSS. So the first thing that we need to do and understand is all web browsers, whether you're using Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, or any other browser, they have inherently built in them their own set of style sheets. And it means that they render certain things like your H1s and your paragraphs and lists and that sort of thing in their own particular way. So the amount of margin or padding might vary, the size of the fonts might vary. What we need to do to develop a more consistent experience across browsers so that our users have a very similar experience visiting your website, we need to do what's called a reset. What a reset is it's a CSS sheet, so it's a style sheet that's been developed that makes a lot of those default styles that browsers have go away, and that we kind of start from a clean page. What we need to do, and there's a link provided, is to go out to the meyerweb.com site and either download using this grab a copy of the file to grab the CSS for the reset, or you can copy what is presented here on the page. I'm going to go ahead and copy this content. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to then go over to Dreamweaver and open up a new CSS document. So File New. We're looking for CSS. Once it opens, I'm going to paste my content in here. And this is all I need to do. I'm not changing any of the content that is here. So then I can go ahead and I'm going to save it. And I'm going to save it into the BioSite Visual Elements folder that I created. This is going to be the folder that holds all of our HTML, CSS, and eventually our images. So I'm going to go into this folder, and here it is. I'm going to call this one reset.css and save it. That's all I need to do to it. So I'm going to close this file. Then I'm going to go into each my index, my about, and my gallery pages and add this particular style sheet. Starting with my index, and I'm going to create this same link that we did for our style sheet, but I'm just going to copy it because there's one that's already here. So I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste this in, but this one still references my styles.css. I want it to reference that new reset.css, so I just changed the name. Please notice that I also placed it above the styles.css, because if you watched the box model video, you will see that the last style that gets applied overwrites it. So we want to reset everything first and then apply our styles, because this is technically, because it's second, closer to the code. I'm going to go and do this for each of my pages. So I'm just going to copy this line that I have now, go into my About page, and do the same thing. It's just going to paste it in there. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go into my image gallery and do the exact same thing. And I'm going to save that one as well. I'm going to go back to my index file and I'm going to save it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to my web browser and we're going to take a look at the page that I have up. This is a little about me. This is my home page for our CSS, or for the CSS biography assignment prior to adding the reset. One of the things I want you to notice is on the left side here, there's this little bit of gap, and on the right side there's a little bit of gap. Also notice the amount of gap on the top and bottom of my image gallery, which is my paragraph. I contained mine within a paragraph. Notice the discs here, the little circles that are part of my unordered list. Let's see what happens when I refresh this page. Notice how everything just got really squished together? That's what happens with that reset.css. It got rid of, there was some margin hiding on the edges. That's part of my browser's default. There was margin on the top and bottom of each of my paragraphs. There was some margin associated with each of my H1, my H2, and my H3. My list no longer has the little bullet points in front of it, and it's changed its positioning. What we need to do now, and I know this sounds like extra work, but really this is going to make for a better site in the end. So the first thing that we need to do is actually go and fix some of this stuff using margins and padding to get it back to the way we want it. So I'm going to go back to my Dreamweaver document. I'm going to go to my style sheet. I'm just going to move this out here to the end. And I'm going to work my way down with paying attention to the things that I don't like and fixing them. Well, I'm going to pay particular attention here to the margins and the padding. I'm not going to be doing anything with my widths at the moment. And so let's work our way through. So with the body, that's the background. That's all of our screen. I'm not going to touch anything that's there. My paragraphs, well, they started to squish together now that I applied this reset.css. So I'm going to do margin bottom. The number that I'm going to place here doesn't really matter in the long run what it is. For your site, as a designer, you're going to kind of evaluate the aesthetics. I'm going to use 14 pixels because I just think it adds a nice bit of spacing. I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to go back to my browser. I'm not going to do that after each one of these, but I want you to see what's going to start happening. Notice I have now a little bit of space. I went and refreshed this page. So now I have a little bit of space because that's where my paragraphs were. I'm going to keep going down. Well, my H1s, they also have they're kind of squished. That's this one up at the very top. I like it at the top. That part's fine. But what I'm going to do is I don't like how the text is all squished together. So I'm going to add some padding so that it's not right up to the blue edge in my case. So let me just go back up to the browser and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. See how my letters go right up to the very edge and right up to the very bottom? I want some spacing there. So I'm going to go in and put in some padding. I'm going to use the padding or margin shortcut, they both work the same way, where if I just use two elements, I'm going to do 16 pixels and 0. And if you use 0, you don't need to include pixels. It's not going to hurt if you do, because 0 is 0. In this case, padding, if I use just the 2 here, this first number, in my case 16 pixels, indicates the top and the bottom. The second one indicates the left and the right. This would be the same as me completely writing out in longhand padding top. Padding right. Oops, let's see, this one's 16 pixels. This one's 0, sorry. That one's 0. And padding left, which is also 0. So this would be the longhand way of doing it. There's nothing wrong with this. This works the same way. But I like to shorten up what I'm doing. So I'm going to shorten this up by just doing the word padding and then doing 16 pixels to represent my up and down, and then a space, and then 0 to represent my left and right. So now if I go ahead and save this and go back out to my browser and refresh, notice that I have some nice padding here. It's moved the letters away. The other thing that I need to do is I don't like how squished my nav is, so that's going to be one of the other next things. But let's get through our H1s, 2s, and 3s first. H2 is kind of the same way. I'm going to want to get some padding in there as well. So I'm going to go down to my H2, and I'm going to give you yet another hint with a shortcut. If you want the padding or the margin to be the same on all 4 sides, so the top, right, bottom, and left, you only need to type in one number. I want my padding in this case to be 10 pixels all the way around. So I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to go back out to my browser. And now I have some nice padding. I have it on the top, the left, and the bottom. It does exist on the far right hand side too, but my text is so short it doesn't go over there, so it doesn't really matter. And I also don't like how my H2 and my paragraphs are so close together. So I'm focusing on my H2s. I'm just going to go in and fix that. So I'm going to go into my H2, and this time I just want to add a margin on the bottom, so just to put some space between it and the paragraph that's right below it. And so what I'm going to do is put just a margin on the bottom of 10 pixels. So I'm going to save that. Likewise, my H3 needed some spacing on the bottom as well, so I'm going to put a margin on the bottom of that so it separates it from the list that's right underneath it. So I'm going to do a margin bottom here, and I'm going to do 10 pixels there just to be consistent. So now if I go back out to my browser after changing those couple things and click refresh, now I have a little space here and a little bit of space here. My list here is still kind of problematic, so we need to fix the list as well. So let's go in and fix that. I'm just going to keep scrolling down. So I went through my H1s, my H2, my H3. Now I'm at my list. And my list item, I'm missing the bullet points, so I need to add those in. So I'm going to use the property list style type. And you'll see that there's any number of types, and you can experiment with these. So you can do square, circle, whatever. I'm just going to use, in this case, I'm going to use disk. Disk is just the standard black little circle. Circle is a circle that's outlined. I'm not sure what some of these others are. Square is another one I like to use on occasion. So maybe we'll just do square. The other thing that we need to do is list style position. Now, list style position just indicates where it's going to place those little bullet points. Inside of the flow or outside of the flow. And let me just demonstrate. I'm going to type in outside, and I'm going to save this. And I'm going to go back out to my browser, and I'm going to refresh. Notice you can't see anything that happened over here. That's because the bullet points are technically way out here. They are outside of the flow of the content of the page. So now let's go back and change this outside to inside. I'm going to save it, go back out here, and refresh. And now it's on the inside. Don't worry about it being right up to the edge right now, because we're going to take care of that eventually. We've added some padding to our H1. We've added some padding to our H2s. We have added some margin underneath our H2 and under our H3 and under our paragraphs. We have also now changed our bullet points to be on the inside and have, in my case, I did squares. So if I go to my About Me page, it should reflect these changes as well. So you're going to see that this is what we've got going on. And you know what I just realized? This places I would like to visit is supposed to be an ordered list, which means it's got numbers. It's got bullet points. So why has it got bullet points? It's because we just told all of our list items. Remember, list items don't care if they're associated with ordered lists or unordered lists. I need to say I want only my unordered list items to use the little square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself another style. So I'm going to go in and say ULLI, which means only the list items that are part of an unordered list. So I've created the style and I just need to move this piece in here. So I'm just going to copy, actually I'm going to cut, I'm not even going to copy, I'm going to cut that out of there and paste it in between, and now that's created that. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to go back out to my About Me page and make sure that it's fixed that. I still can't see my numbers, but trust me, they're there. And if we need to fix them later, we will fix them later. Okay, and the last thing that I know that I want to fix is the navigation area is kind of squished on mine. I'm going to go back out here. This is a little squished and it's not nice and spaced anymore. So what I'm going to do is I need to create, I don't just have a plain nav. I have a nav paragraph, but I don't have just a regular nav. And if you realize the nav P, the reason we have more space underneath is because we had gone into our paragraphs up here and said, hey, put a margin bottom of 14. Well, you know what? I don't want that on my nav paragraph. I want it to be able to be centered. So I'm going to go into my nav P bottom 0. And I'm going to save that. Now let's go back out to the browser and see what's going on. And see how that's really quite squishy now? What I need to do is go into my nav, and I'm going to actually just give that a little bit of breathing room by putting some padding on there. But as I was mentioning, I don't have just a plain nav. I have nav P, so I need to create a nav element style. So nav, there's my new nav style, and I need to just create some padding. And because this is a centered element, I don't care so much about the left and right padding, but I do care about the top and bottom padding. So I'm going to give that just a padding of 6 pixels, and I'll let it go all the way around because the right and left doesn't really matter what I put on it. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go back out to my browser and refresh, and now I have a little bit of wiggle room there. Now these are all of the fixes that I need to do to at least get some of that padding and margin the way I want it. In the next step, now we're going to actually start working with some visual elements to make things more appealing. So stay tuned.